Joining us now in the Hyundai Texans Radio studio, it's Texans General Manager Nick Caserio. Nick, great to see you. How was the mini bye, the little break? I don't know if you took any time off. How'd you spend it?
Yeah, it was good. It's fairly productive. I got a chance to see some football on Saturday on a scouting front, and then Sunday had an opportunity to spend the day with my daughter. So
nice.
It was kind of the best of both worlds. So worked out well.
So as you're spending your day with your daughter and this. Just asking, are you able to completely shut off football? It is. I'm spending it with my daughter, whatever's going on in football. Just can't even focus on it.
Is Red Zone on in the background, Nick?
No, it's not. I actually was able to kind of finish up some things on the Giants on Sunday. So take some time in the morning, get some time with the family, and then the afternoon while they're doing some things, try to work on the Giants and just try to stay on on par with on track with the preparation. So that's what I try to do.
But this is a good question. How do you keep up with the league now? How do you digest information that transpired over the course of a Sunday afternoon?
Yeah, you try not to worry necessarily about what happened one particular weekend or one particular game. Coincidentally, the Giants are on their bye, so it wasn't as if we had the opportunity to watch them. So there were other teams that were playing. We're kind of working our way here through kind of the NFC East a little bit. You know, Philly last Thursday, Giants this weekend, Washington next weekend. So I'd say the biggest thing is just familiarizing yourself with opponents that you don't see other than maybe once every 4 years. So from that standpoint, you try to work on the Giants, finish up the Giants, and then start to turn the page a little bit and start to prepare a little bit for Washington this week so we can kind of stay on track.
Nick, let's take one final look back at the game against the Eagles because there were some bright moments in that particular game. You had 10 rookies that ended up playing in a game, and a lot of them did some really good things. What are your overall thoughts looking back to Thursday against the Eagles?
Yeah, I'd say that game's kind of emblematic of kind of some of the things that have happened this season. Did some good things, kind of put ourselves into position in the end, just, wasn't enough. I'd say in the end, situationally, they had the advantage, third down, red area, and the turnovers. So those are the areas and the plays that whoever has the advantage, there's a good chance at the end of the game they're probably going to be on top of the scoreboard. So they're a good team. We did some decent things offensively, ran the ball fairly well. I mean, DP had a good night. Defensively did a good job. Actually made the quarterback a little bit uncomfortable at times. So, run game kind of gave up, a little bit, some yards there. So, but in the end, the situational things, the turnovers, the third down to the red area, they had the advantage, and as a result, they had the advantage on the scoreboard.
We had Tavier Thomas on the Players Show and asked him about the rookie class, and he said in so many words, they don't seem like rookies. They seem like they're really taking to things pretty well. How would you assess the class midway through the season, Nick?
Yeah, you try not to take a snapshot, but I'd say overall making progress, a little bit up and down at points. There's certain things that each player can do individually to improve, whether it's their technique, whether it's a skill, whether it's their preparation, whatever that is. So from that perspective, I'd say the overall approach and attitude has been good. It's really more about just trying to improve some things and clean up some things so you don't have sort of, I'd say, repeat errors or repeat mistakes. So a lot of that is growing pains, and you're going to have, the only way you learn is by doing it and then doing it on film and then seeing it and correcting it and trying to make sure that it doesn't happen again moving forward. So it's all part of the process. So I'd say overall the attitude and the effort has been pretty consistent from the beginning.
I can't believe you stole my rookie question. Sorry, that's my question.
Okay.
Rookie questions
I'm
and
sure you
draft
have more.
questions.
I'm sure you have more rookie questions.
No, now that you taking that question, I'm not going to ask. I'm going to ask you about the Giants, Nick. Two-parter. A, let's dive into the Giants to see what we have to say about them. And B, did you do squats this morning so you can match Saquon Barkley's legs when you see him on Sunday?
My squat day is Friday, and I'd probably do a little bit less than Saquon. But I'd say overall, Joe and Brian have done a great job of sort of implementing their program from the beginning. I think their familiarity with each other and their time in Buffalo certainly has sort of eased that transition. I'd say start at the top. Brian's a really, I would say, one of the better coaches in the league. Very smart, has a background on the defensive side of the ball. That's kind of how he was trained, and then kind of transitioned to offense. Has a lot of experience, has been in a number of different systems. I'd say some of the things that he believes in, they're representative of kind of how they play. You see that in their team. And he and Joe have a really good working relationship. They've done a good job. So, Brian is the head coach, and then, hired Mike Kafka, who Mike played in the league. Mike's very smart, has a lot of experience, very good coach, been in a good system in Kansas City. And then Wink has been as good a defensive coordinator as has been here for a number of years. Had an opportunity, face their teams in Baltimore, and say they play with a very aggressive mindset, a very aggressive mentality, probably more than any other in the league. And what they've done, they've actually combined. They've gotten good production from their rookies in addition to some of the veteran players. I'd say starting defensively, they're really good in the running game. They're really good in the red area. And because kind of seems like each week we talk about the interior of the defensive line. And Dexter Lawrence has played as good as any defensive lineman in the league. You know, put him up there with Simmons, Hargrave, some of the players that we've seen here. I mean, he's big, he's strong, he's long, he's very disruptive. He's really had his best year this season. So they've done a good job of kind of maximizing him. I'd say Leonard's a good player. He's kind of been bothered a little bit by the knee injury, but he's still a disruptive player. KT's done a good job for them since he's kind of been inserted a lot of missed a little bit in the preseason, missed the first couple games, but he's done a good job on the edge of the defense. And they've gotten some play out of some veterans who maybe weren't with the team, but they've brought in. Jalen Smith has done a nice job for them on the inside part. And then McFadden has kind of started to rotate in an inside linebacker. In the secondary, I mean, Fabian Moreau's done a really good job for him. So they brought him in kind of at the end of training camp, put him on a practice squad, and he's kind of emerged as their best corner. Jackson's having a good year. They've kind of rotated some players inside the formation there a little bit. McKinney's going to be out, obviously, with the situation that took place here yesterday. Yep. He'll be out for 4 games, but he's done a good job. And then Julian Love, his role is kind of increased relative to last season. Very versatile, smart, instinctive player. So defensively, they've done a good job, I would say, situationally. They're at the top. I want to say, actually, we're tied for 9th in the league in turnover margin. So they've forced, I want to say, 9 fumbles, which puts them at the top of the league. They don't have as many interceptions. Then offensively, they kind of play to their strengths. So they've taken some of the things that Daniel does really well, which is run. And he's made good decisions. He's mitigated sort of some of the bad plays. He doesn't have a lot of interceptions. Saquon's a very skilled, versatile player, does a lot of things well. I think he has combined over 1,000 yards between rushing and receiving. So everything kind of starts with those 2 players. And then Andrew Thomas has played really, really well for them at left tackle. Their offensive line as a whole, I would say, has played pretty good for them. Evan is, he's been hurt here, Neal, past, 3 to 4 games, but Feliciano is a player that, has experience with Daboll and Buffalo, with Joe, and he's done a really good job solidifying the interior of the offensive line. They've gotten really good play out of Bellinger as well at tight end. I know he got hurt against Jacksonville, kind of poked his eye or did whatever he did. And then they've kind of incorporated Wan'Dale Robinson a little bit. So it's a combination of young, old, kind of veteran, new, and then they've really, in the end, been able to execute in the fourth quarter. They're 6-1 in one-score games, and in a number of those games they trailed in the fourth quarter. So I'd say they've handled a lot of the situational elements as a team. It's a very tough-minded team. They have a certain play style, certain way they want to play. So we have to be able to match how they're going to play.
Is Daniel Jones the latest good example of, hey, you never know how it's going to work out for a player over the course of a few years? It might take a few seasons for the light to really go on in a situation, too, with new staff and new elements.
Yeah, I mean, what's happened in the past really doesn't have as much relevance. I think what they've done is kind of looked at Daniel and said, what are the things that he does well? Try to accentuate his strengths, which he's very deceptively athletic. He's faster than you think he is. He's stronger than you think he is. There's a lot of quarterback design runs, the zone reads, and then you combine that with Barkley. And he's made good decisions. So he goes to the right spot with the ball, and I'd say that's a credit to the offensive staff for how they've handled it, from Brian to Mike, kind of how they've put the game plan together. And I think Daniel is a very smart kid, and he understands how they need to play, how they want him to play. And he's played smart, good situational football, and he's been a factor with his legs. And then Saquon, again, has probably been as big of an impact on their offense as anything. So tackling will be at a premium as it's been, for most of these games.
Nick, since he's been back from missing preseason, Kayvon Thibodeaux, from the time you saw him in college till now, about a year span, what have you seen in him, and what kind of problems does he present on the edge?
Yeah, I'd say his effort and his overall playing style is very good. He's very tough. He runs really well. I mean, the play that he had against ETN, chasing him 45, 50 yards down the field, you're talking about a guy 6'4", 255, 260, that chased the back 4-3 or whatever ETN runs down the field. So he's played well. He's kind of transitioned to playing more exclusively from a 2-point stance because they're really more of a 30-front team, more 2 outside linebackers, 2 end-of-line of scrimmage players. So he's got good length. He's got good playing strength. He's got good toughness. And he's transitioned well to Wink's scheme and kind of how they're trying to play. So Kayvon was a good player at Oregon. He's been a productive player to this point. So, it's no surprise that he's played well.
Nick, back to your young players. The record isn't what you want it to be at all. And how does that affect them? How important is it to keep a positive atmosphere, positive culture going around them as they continue to play through the season?
Yeah, really, you want to take it 1 week at a time. So that's what this league is about. So you try to look at the week and what do you have to do that week in order to prepare, in order to get ready to play the next opponent. So I think just understanding the week-to-week nature of it and how each week, whatever happened last week in the end doesn't have necessarily relevance, understanding what happened, understand the why behind it, and just try to make some progress, understanding that you're going to go through some ups and downs. Like we've played 8 games. We have another 9 remaining. Then you tack on the 3 preseason games. So these players have played 11 games, so they already played a full college season, and we have half the season remaining. So I would say a certain level of stick-to-itiveness, certain level of discipline to stay on your routine and just stay committed to what you need to do on a week-to-week basis and really just understand the opponent, who you're playing. And it's a very personnel-driven league, so understanding Wan'Dale Robinson versus Chris Slayton versus, whoever the different receivers are, the different offensive linemen that you're going to face. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How do you exploit those? Because in the end, that's what it's going to come down to. And the better you understand that, and that's what you have to focus on and not necessarily get caught up in what's the record, what are the standings. Like, we can't control that. We can control what we can control, which is our performance, is how we prepare. And the record is what the record is, but ultimately you have to focus on that week and just kind of going through your process and get ready to play on Sunday against a good Giants team.
Nick, I happened to see this article, and I didn't read it. I just saw the headline, and I thought it would be a good question to ask you just your opinion on. Somebody had written about the trade deadline being later in the year, like week 11, week 12. Like you just said, we've played 8 games, and the trade deadline was last week, and we still have 9 games left to go, and most teams have 9 games left to go. Would it behoove the NFL to move the trade deadline a little bit later? Would you like to see it a little bit later, or is that just like a case-by-case basis, like year to year? Like, well, some years I'd want it earlier, some years I'd want it later.
Yeah, I think the NFL has done a good job of looking at some different policies or different things that we can do maybe a little bit differently, or the timing element involved. So if there's any merit to doing that. So I think whatever it is, you're prepared for. If it's a week later, then you're prepared for a week later. It doesn't necessarily change anything materially. Each team has to look at their team, look at their composition. Like the thing that was unique this year, there was more activity this year than there was at any other point. So I'd say that doesn't necessarily mean anything, or is that going to be a trend moving forward? A lot of trades, even going to the draft and even during the offseason, they're all player driven. So you don't necessarily know how it's going to go. You could think you're going to trade or want to trade or do something, but in the end, if it doesn't materialize, then there's no trade, and then you move on. So I think the league will look at it. If it makes sense, moving it, then they'll do it. If it doesn't, then we'll kind of keep it where it is. But, in the end, you just have to be prepared. Just try to make good decisions for your team with your roster, wherever it is.
Couple of other notes from the Philadelphia game. You're coming off the loss to Tennessee, tough loss, and it seemed like the guys really rallied together, particularly early, trying to find a way to move the football. They did, tied at the half, 14-14. You hit Catoriano his first catch, and Chris Moore's another touchdown pass. What about the way they came together in the first half overall, Nick?
Yeah, the players and the staff did a really good job of getting ready to play. So anytime you have that short turnaround, a quick turnaround, it's taxing. It's mentally and physically taxing. But players had a good attitude. The coaches made sure the players that were prepared were able to get off to a good start. There was a certain energy that was involved. Playing Thursday night, you're playing, the best team in the league on prime time, so everybody knows that you're playing. You're the only game in town, so to speak, other than the Astros. But so they came out with good energy. Or as a team, we came out with good energy. We just weren't able to sustain it completely until the end. But overall, the players and the coaches did a really good job of getting ready to play, and we're able to see some things early in the game.
Nick, as we get closer to the end of the college football season, how does it kind of change for your college scouts, and what's kind of the program from here until we get to the Senior Bowl and those All-Star games at the end?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. We're kind of winding down here. You really have a handful of weeks left in college football. Realistically, kind of Thanksgiving weekend is sort of the end. You'll have another game the following week, and then you have the conference championships, and then you're really into bowl season. So our staff's done a really good job. A lot of scouts. Matter of fact, I was kind of going through my notes from yesterday, some of the reports that have come in. It's kind of second time through, third time through. You're kind of seeing players, seeing anything that's changed, any upgrades, any downgrades. So I'd say we've seen a lot of players. We have a lot of information on those players now. It's starting to fine-tune that. And in December, we'll kind of have the first initial run-through, maybe identify some needs, not necessarily grades, but some needs. Or here are some of the things that we're going to have to see if we can find more information out about over the next however many months and weeks. And then once the season is over, Then you'll have an idea of who's going to attend East-West, who's going to attend the Senior Bowl, and kind of start to prepare for that. And then you have the underclassmen, which they'll make a declaration by the middle of January relative to their eligibility. So we're winding down. There's still a lot of information that's available. You maybe have a player didn't play earlier in the year that's back on the field. You can kind of see how he's played. Vice versa, you've had some guys who have kind of been hurt all year, and it might be done for the rest of the year. So, all right, that's all the information that we have. All right, kind of transition to the next evaluation stage.
Does it translate, and I want to ask this in a variety of ways, guys who come up big in big games on the college level, does that translate sometimes? And how do you rate that? They get a check mark because they're big-time players in big-time situations.
No, it's a good question, Mark. I'd say you're looking at, and in college, at times there isn't a lot of a situational football, I'd say, just because of the way that it's played. But, okay, their production relative to the opponent. So when you see them against, I know we kind of joke about the SEC, but each week you're seeing them play against the best players. And when you look at, even back to Tennessee's defense, they have, 5 or 6 guys that played in the SEC. We have a number of guys that play in the SEC. That's the best competition. Doesn't mean that there's not a lot of great programs out there, which there is. But how the player performs maybe against the best competition, a critical situation, doesn't necessarily mean that's going to translate over. Not necessarily, but it's just kind of, to your point, we can grade it accordingly. Okay, how they played against this team, the game grade against this team in this game was this. All right, how they played against maybe a player on the other side of the ball, how they fared against them, because ultimately that's representative of what they're going to see on a week-to-week basis. So it's all part of the evaluation. You don't, I'd say, minimize or put more importance on it. It's certainly a part of the equation. And then if you have a question, you're ultimately going to go back and say, all right, let's see how they played against the best people and the best players and how do they perform. And then if you see that over a course of time, they have a track record of performance, okay, that's a good telltale sign of, all right, the expectation is that guy's going to be able to come in and perform at a certain level if he's given the opportunities.
Nick, as it pertains to underclassmen, you said something to me that's always been interesting. They have until middle of January to make a decision. Is it important to have sort of an idea of what that player is considering so that you can see him on campus, maybe ask questions and do some of those things? You can always do it after the fact, but is it important to track that beforehand, or do you just say, hey, look, underclassmen, we kind of got our eye on, but really we just January 15th or whatever the day is, we'll just find out then and we'll go from there?
No, it's a good point. I mean, you do your legwork ahead of time, and I'd say what you find is you step on campus. Some programs and some people, they're more inclined to talk about certain players with the understanding, okay, there's a good chance this player is probably going to make himself eligible at the end of the year. So you want to be respectful of the colleges. You don't want to assume anything. So, you don't want to do anything because the relationship we have a lot of the schools between the NFL and the NCAA, we have a good relationship. So you don't want to do anything that sort of affects that relationship. So you want to be smart about how you approach it. We can evaluate as many players as we want, because we watch them play. And then once you get on campus, when you get in a situation where the liaison sits with a group and he might say, hey, you know what, there's a good chance this player is probably going to declare, and they might be more inclined. You find some schools are maybe more apt to talk about them. Other, it's kind of more taboo. So whatever it is, okay, we're not going to try to make it up. We'll try to do our job, do our due diligence, be prepared. And whichever way it goes, all right, if he decides to go back to school, no problem. Then we have our evaluation from the 22 season, and then we're going to build on the 23 season. If he makes a decision that he wants to declare, then we've done the work. All right, and then the evaluation is done from a playing standpoint. Now we have to look into and drill down some of the things more on a personal level, which you really don't have the opportunity to do until, call it, February and March.
One more for you. Is there extra juice in going to New York? You see the Manhattan skyline right there. I know we're in New Jersey, but it's right there. Does it give you a little extra in the game?
Yeah, it's a great place to play. MetLife Stadium. I mean, it's funny. Not too many stadiums where you have two teams. That's their home stadium. So they share it, the Jets and the Giants. So they'll make everything blue and white. Yep. They'll move away from green and whatever the colors the Jets are wearing these days. I mean, it's hard to say. So it's a good opportunity playing outdoors, which will be something we haven't done here, since Jacksonville, but different environment. So the elements don't look like they'll be that big of a factor. Going to the East Coast, kind of, losing an hour or kind of moving ahead an hour, whatever that is. So playing midday, 1 o'clock, it'll be a nice fall day, and hopefully we can go out there and play good football against a good team.
Nick, thanks a lot. Good luck.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to know when we post new content.